Okay, the time has come, my friends, for us to see the comparison of AC Shadows on different platforms. I said in my review, the game is gorgeous. I played it on PC, both my supercomputer, my gaming laptop 3070, and then my ROG Ally. It actually ran decently well on the ROG Ally, which I was impressed by because I did not expect it to like even boot. But in this little comparison, Digital Foundry is going to be able to go side by side and show console versions, show PC versions, and all of that. And I'm here for it because I haven't seen how it looks or how it runs on any of that. So I want to see. I want to see what it's like. Let's check it out. One thing I forgot to mention in my review, don't be upset. I totally forgot to mention it. This is gonna really tick off some of you. One of the changes / cuts they made in AC Shadows. You know how you go up to viewpoints to synchronize? In all the other games, you go up there and you press a button. You press Y or triangle to synchronize and the camera swoops around, right? They changed it so when you hop up, it sweeps around automatically. You don't press a button. And you can't redo that. It swoops around the first time and that's it. Yeah, get triggered. Get triggered, losers.
Assassin's Creed Shadows marks a very special milestone in the series as the first entry developed with a total focus on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series machines, and PC.
And it looks
like a bold transition with a clear payoff in its technology. One that finally puts last-gen PS4 and Xbox One console support aside to allow Shadows the full provision of Anvil Engine's latest features.
Thank God they did that. 5 years into the gen, we're finally shedding last-gen stuff. I mean, granted, they've had games recently that weren't supported on Xbox One or PS4, but the engine did technically support it, so it didn't like really push the boundary. But this game really does look like a next gen AC game, which is nice. The quality of assets, the cloth sim is back, thank God. Oh my God, I've said it a bajillion times, I'll say it again. Give me cloth sim before you give me crazy ray tracing. It makes more difference. I prefer cloth sim. Give me good cloth sim.
Lighting and shadow accuracy is greatly improved via a new, though still optional, ray-traced global illumination setting, while ray-traced reflections are also possible on PC and PS5 Pro. Procedural weather simulation for wind, rain, and fog are also now integrated into the world design. And lastly, we have more exhaustive use of world destruction physics.
Ooh.
All combined, the more complex nature of Shadow's world is beyond what was possible in 2023's cross-gen release Assassin's Creed Mirage, and it gives us the evolutionary jump I've long been hoping to see from the series. Developer Ubisoft Quebec debuts all of this with Shadow's feudal Japan setting, except to enjoy every new feature, to get the so-called next-gen Assassin's Creed experience, it's necessary to pick the right hardware and graphics mode.
Indeed. The destructible environment stuff too, I was expecting that to have like more of a play in the game. And there are times where you use it where you like stab through the screens and stuff. But other than that, it's just kind of fun. Like you just go up to like a bamboo forest and you just kind of cut your way in like your own path through it. It's kind of stupid, but it's fun. You know, I'll take it. It's just kind of stupid and fun. What are you going to do?
Digital Foundry's own Oliver Mackenzie will be dissecting the PS5 Pro upgrades in a future video, so stay tuned for that. In this tech review though, I'm tackling the base consoles, the regular PS5, Xbox Series X and S models. The first question being, does the 4 teraflop Xbox Series S still hand in a decent experience on its single 30 FPS mode, or are there trade-offs to consider?
The hair, you can really see a difference. Like just individual strands on quality mode on the X versus like the more chunky hair on the left. Huge difference just there.
And out of the 3 modes available to Xbox Series X and PS5, the 60 FPS performance, 40 FPS balanced, and 30 FPS quality options, which is the ideal way to play? Let's find out. The new tech of the Anvil engine deserves a moment in the spotlight. After all, on console and PC, this is the first series entry to officially adopt ray tracing, and it has a huge impact on the presentation of its world. For PS5, Series X and S in particular, we get RT global illumination, adding richer, more realistic ambient light bounce and shading. Alas, while ray-traced reflections are also included in shadows, they are reserved for the PC release and PS5 Pro, meaning we resort to the screen space method for reflections on the base consoles. RTGI, though, is in place on all formats, though there is another catch to consider. Specifically, it only engages globally across the entire explorable map on PS5 and Series X using their 30 FPS quality and 40 FPS balanced modes. On the 60 FPS performance mode, however, we switch to Ubisoft's classic baked GI method, as also used in AC Valhalla and Mirage. The exception to this,
which honestly still looks pretty good. Luke, why did you choose the Ally as your main handheld? Frankly, it's because I prefer the Windows software running on it. I know that makes me sound like a heathen, but it's just frankly because I like to have like the ability to have the Ubisoft launcher to be able to test this game on it, and like the Xbox launcher to be able to play Game Pass titles. Whereas like the Steam Deck, you can technically do that. You set up like separate partitions and then you can install the launcher into that. But even that's running through wrappers because it's a Linux device running a Windows like thing. It's possible, but it's a much bigger headache. Whereas the RG Ally, you just swipe up from the bottom, press the launcher you want, and you're good to go. So for me, it's worked better, but I understand it's basically just a laptop in a handheld form, and some people hate the idea of that, and I totally get it. But for me, I prefer it. I prefer it, frankly. He's a Windows shill. I knew it. Got me. Oh no.
is the hideout area, which enables RTGI regardless of your selected mode, but will also always run at 30 frames per second. As for Xbox...
Okay, hold on. Because this was the big thing, is that they said when they dropped the spec sheet, you could turn off ray tracing. You could. The problem is it has to run at the settlement because everything's dynamic. They can't just bake the lighting because you're literally going to be moving buildings and placing objects and stuff, new trees, foliage, whatever. So it seems like that is still the case.
Is the hideout area, which enables RTGI regardless of your selected mode, but will also always run at 30 frames per second.
I want to see.
As for Xbox Series S, RTGI only appears in this same very limited capacity in the hideout area, but never beyond it.
Interesting. Okay. So it's what we expected.
To show that all-important ray tracing upgrade.
Jeez, dude. So Series X performance versus quality on the right. So this is the difference between the ray trace lighting and the baked lighting.
Let's see Series X in action. For a game with such a diversity in weather states, multiple season changes, plus destructible environments, Shadow's world is more dynamic than any Assassin's Creed game before it. The domino effect being that the real-time ray-traced approach has an advantage in being more adaptable. It better simulates light and shadow interactions across a constantly changing environment, while the older baked GI method of the 60 FPS performance.
I mean, just look at the difference in shadows too. On the left, everything is just generally darker, kind of just muddy. Whereas on the right, you actually have the sun casting rays into the trees. So you get shadows cast on the bamboo shafts, stalks, whatever they are. It is beautiful. It makes one heck of a difference. Like, this is still perfectly playable, absolutely, but it's definitely very, very pretty. And this is, to be clear, like, this is one of those games that was designed from the outset with this like ray traced global illumination in mind. Because from the outset, they're like, we're going to have different dynamic weather systems, season changes across the same map. We're going to allow players to like tear down and break apart bamboo and bushes and cut down reeds and stuff. We're going to let them destroy parts of buildings and wagons and all this stuff. So we can't just bake in all the lighting the way that we typically would do if we want things to be fully, truly dynamic. And it sounds like they were able to still find a way to do baked lighting for performance modes, even with the dynamic world. But man, you can definitely see the perks of it when you look at the quality modes.
Performance mode must still rely on pre-calculated lighting states for each season. Outdoors then, the impact is clear to see. The RTGI of the quality mode adds richer, more detailed pockets of shade between objects, like these clay pots, the ox carts, and vegetation. Likewise, you'll notice it in the depth of shading on character faces in daylight, and especially the interiors of shops, where the baked GI method struggles to match up. Finally, you'll also...
Oh yeah, look at that. Just the difference between the baked lighting, where everything is just flat and flatly lit inside, versus the actual shadows that are cast when you ray trace it.
Also see an all-round improvement in lighting. Diffuse light bounce from nearby coloured scenery has an impact on the world, helping to realistically lighten shaded patches on the ground with an appropriate hue.
It was one of the crazier things. I don't think I have footage of it. I don't know where it is. I don't think I wrote it down, but there was one moment where like there was a cherry blossom tree in sunlight, like right on the threshold of a shadow like this, over being cast from a mountain. And so the sun was hitting the cherry blossom tree and the pink leaves, but then that light reflected down onto the path beneath it. And so even though it was in shadow, it had this pinkish hue to the light, like it would in real life, and it was just gorgeous. But there's a bunch of little things like that you'll notice with the ray tracing that you just can't do when you bake in lighting.
Ubisoft's classic baked GI method is still respectable, but has clear limitations. Also, sadly, all of these limits apply to the Series S release across the main world in the same manner as the 60 FPS performance modes on Series X and PS5. It oversaturates certain details with color in an attempt to match up to the RTGI lighting, while interiors and up-close character detail lack the same shading depth.
It's just what's really impressive, like, or maybe remarkable to me, is just how different the color temperatures can be too. Like, look at this side by side. Look how much cooler the color tone is when you ray trace it versus the pre-baked solution. Totally different vibe. You know, just because the shade is actually being calculated versus
while interiors and up-close character detail lack the same shading depth. The other catch is that Series S only runs at 30 frames per second, so there's really no performance upside to missing out here, and it's the worst of both worlds compared to the Series X options.
Well, duh.
As a kind of consolation, the hideout area...
That's one of those things where it's like, I mean, this has been true for this entire generation, is that the Series S is the worst of all situations. It's like, yeah, it's the weakest device. Of course it's going to be the weakest one. And it's not going to run as well, and it's not going to look as good. Like, no duh. You know, if for anybody to be like, oh my God, what? It just means they haven't been paying attention for like 5 years.
Which is a small customizable sandbox that lets us decorate and plant buildings as we like, does engage RTGI on Series S. It's possible to enjoy it there, but for the rest of the game, the reality is that Series S runs at a third of the compute power of the Series X, which has a knock-on effect for its features. It's a huge win for Series X and PS5 then, and while the lack of ray-traced reflections is a shame, the RTGI allows for a much grander payoff for Assassin's Creed Shadows world design.
What I said in my review was that the game, because I see some of you asking how does it run on PC though? The game runs like it looks, okay? It's heavy. If you want to crank the ray tracing and see some crazy beautiful scenes, you can do that. You can do that. And absolutely the game will look gorgeous while you are enjoying that. But yeah, I mean, there's just a bunch of crazy beautiful shots where the lighting is super accurate. That's a store owner. But what really struck me is in like the background, you'll see shadows cast way more finely than you see in most open world games, where like actual leaves that are off camera are ray traced or see their shadows ray traced, the branches of the tree, everything. And you just don't typically see that. Like typically things just get really muddy, especially when they're farther away from the camera. But in shadows, like it's probably one of the best implementations of ray tracing in an open world game that I've seen, because it's not just like, ooh, ray traced reflections are better now. It applies to like everything across the board. Even a shot like this where you can see the gradient of light from inside illuminated by the little bitty lamps to outside where it's moonlit, just the fine gradation of light is just very, very precise, which I appreciate because I think it looks beautiful. It looks beautiful. What else do they do in here? They do frame rate tests. They do Series S frame rate. That's its own section. Okay, we'll see frame rate tests. Let's see. We know exactly how this story is going to end.
On to performance testing, and the quality mode justifies a focus first, given it's offering a wealth of new Anvil Engine features. I'm also glad to say it's well optimized in targeting 30 frames per second. From the very opening siege on the Iga province to the rapid open world roaming on horseback with Naoe, it's broadly a locked 30 on both PS5 and Series X. The added demands of RTGI and the new hair physics aren't an issue here. The only snag I can see is actually a byproduct of using dynamic resolution scaling, again going from 1080p to 1620p. Much like other recent Assassin's Creed titles using DRS, this does, at times, cause drops where the rendering load changes rapidly. So, for example, tilting the camera skyward and then abruptly down to complex scenery gives the renderer only a moment to adjust the pixel structure. Alas, in that window, there will be dropped frames. It happens so rarely outside of these forced moments though, with battles only occasionally showing a few odd dropped frames at points as the camera pans around.
It is one of those things where, like, if you want to do a stress test on a game, you can usually figure out what you need to do to make it snap or break or struggle. You know, you can figure out where the heavy points are in a game and you know, demonstrate that. Sometimes it's dense foliage. Sometimes it is that panning from the sky to the ground, which is like a good way to test console versions of games. But it is important to remember also that, like, most players are not playing like this. You know, that's not how they're going through gameplay sessions. They are going to be playing it like this, where they have the camera centered on what they're looking at, and they're going to ride through the environment like that, you know?
Other than that, it's a robust 30 FPS experience on both machines. Of course, 30 FPS might be a compromise too far for some to enjoy Assassin's Creed Shadows ray tracing, and that's where the balanced mode shines. For those equipped with a 120Hz display, the balanced mode unlocks in the menus for 40 FPS gameplay instead. The resolution range drops, but the RTGI and hair physics are intact for all aspects of gameplay, and it's highly recommended. We're getting a mostly locked 40 frames per second, albeit with a similar catch to the quality mode, in that, on occasion, sudden camera movements catch the DRS off guard. PS5 and Series X are well optimized for this mode otherwise, besides the triggering of a few dropped frames. The one additional catch to this mode is that the hideout area and cutscenes will still switch to a 30 FPS cap. In fact, walking up this mountain path to the hideout causes this frame rate change in real time, 40 down to 30 and back again, as you pass an invisible threshold. It's unclear how well this area might have held up at the usual 40 FPS, but at least, for all gameplay elsewhere, we're getting an extra 10 frames per second. Rounding out is of course the performance mode, where there's no denying the advantage of a 60 frames per second update. In terms of controller response, especially while timing ripostes in combat, it's a hugely welcome option to have. We're at a crossroads though, as is so often the case this generation, between getting cutting edge features at 30 FPS or missing out at 60. And sadly, it's hard to shake the sense that we're losing a lot of what makes Shadows a next-generation Assassin's Creed game while using this mode. In terms of its delivery at 60 FPS at least, PS5 and...
I'm just saying, you guys join the PC Master Race by spending a crap ton of money. You could have the best of both worlds. That's all I'm saying. You know, just sell your car and buy a high-end PC, and then you get all of it. That's what I'm saying.
And Series X hold well at the target most of the time, but be warned that it is the mode most prone to drops. Dramatic camera swings will trigger brief lurches into the mid-50s more frequently. Thankfully, these kinds of drops are easily covered by VRR technology if your display supports it. Also, once again, cutscenes and the hideout area continue to switch to 30 FPS in this mode, which is all the more jarring coming from a 60 FPS baseline. Finally, we have the Series S version. With its single means of play at 30 FPS, you'd hope the limited use of RTGI, axed hair physics, and its significant resolution cut would qualify it for a tight lock. For a majority of the time, it does admittedly hold up well, but the reality is that there are more noticeable sub-30 drops than, for example, the 30 FPS quality mode on Series X.
I mean, I'm just be real. At this point in the generation, I'm just shocked the Series S can run anything at all. I mean, maybe that's unfair of me. But every once in a while, I just pause. I'm like, it kind of is amazing this thing can run these games. Like, it's even that's impressive. Yeah, it doesn't run them well, but it runs them.
It's not a deal breaker, but battles and cutscenes are slightly more prone to dips under the line. Unsurprisingly, it's in these moments that the 720p native resolution, the lower bounds of its DRS, appears most obviously.
Bless your girlfriend.
Hence,
Woof.
it makes sense that there is no 40 FPS balanced mode on Series S after all.
It's also, I mean, you can see the FSR stuff they're using. They're trying to upscale this like crazy, just to fix it and clean it up. But I mean, this is what happens when you have a device that's basically just a 1X that's a little souped up. It's like, yeah, it's going to struggle 5 years later.
It's already seemingly at its limit at 30, though at the very least, it holds at the target well in the hideout area with RTGI engaged there. Assassin's Creed Shadows is the series' most exciting new entry in years, with PS5 and Series X at last showing off their mettle via new Anvil engine features. Simply put, the more physics-based, ray-traced nature of its feudal-era Japan setting is the absolute star of the show this year. The drawback is that we're forced to decide between 3 modes, a Hobson's choice that either grants 60 FPS gameplay or a more exciting suite of visual upgrades at 30 or 40 FPS. Looking purely at the base consoles here, I'd recommend the 40 FPS mode if possible to demonstrate where the series technology is headed. As for the Series S version, the situation is less impressive. It's the closest we may see to a last-gen rendition of the game in many ways. The cut resolution, the lower texture quality, shadows, limited RTGI, and removed hair strand physics, plus that 30 FPS cap are all hard pills to swallow. The adventure is otherwise.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also like you should know what you're getting into with the budget option. I mean, it's the Series S's promise was never to provide the best place to play game, like modern games. It was to just provide you the like most affordable place. And it's doing that. It just is, I mean, as he's describing, he's like, yeah, there's a lot of things you give up, you know, gives the game personality. It's Series S's last gen. No, the Series S is basically an Xbox One X that has, you know, a few upgrades here and there, but fun, like foundationally, what people that are way smarter than me have said in their tech analysis of it is that it's basically a One X, which was like the late generation upgrade from the One X, you know, that came, you know, last gen. And so I understand why Xbox put it out there. The whole premise of the Xbox like marketing strategy right now is play the games you want to play anywhere. We should make it available to anyone, anywhere. My frustration is that the Series S is literally the lowest common denominator and the weakest link. The fact that it runs at all on the Series S is kind of amazing to me, especially when you play Shadows, you'll see how dense some of those environments are. It really is crazy, but it's wild. Jack, thank you for the 5. I'll stand by this. The Series S is the worst console ever made in terms of negative effects on the gaming industry. It holds everyone back. Unless you have the tech to scale, I don't think you're necessarily wrong. I mean, it's like if you're trying if they were to try and be like, hey, we're going to develop the next gen Red Dead Redemption game, but we're going to support the Nintendo Switch, I think everybody would be like, what? Really? Is that what? I think we'd all like roll our eyes. That's unfortunate, but I do think that that's what people would do. And I think it's because when you have to develop for the lowest common denominator, for the weakest link, you're going to make sacrifices, and there's going to be things that are held back as a result. And it's just, it's too bad. It's too bad, because I do think that they have, in their pursuit of accessibility for these games at the lowest price point, they also have ended up making some specifically AAA cross-platform games less ambitious than they would have like otherwise been. Isn't a Series S comparable to a PC build from like 10 years ago? It's tough, but I mean, what you're talking about with the Series S is a console that runs these games at a base resolution of 720, and they typically, like with this game, it's 720, and it tries to upscale it to 1080, and that is a weaker machine for sure. I mean, that would be considered a low budget PC build nowadays. But it's also $300. Like I don't think you're going to get a PC built for that price. Maybe there's people that have done it, but like it's a budget device, and that's what it's meant to be, and it succeeds in that, but it's not there. PS5 Pro performance. The PS5 Pro performance, I've heard from a couple people I know that have been playing it, is pretty damn good. Shocker, it's the best place to play. I think they show it here. So yeah, this is a great little breakdown. The Series S runs it internally at 720. It does TAAU upscaling, trying to get to 1620p. Okay, I stand corrected. It tries to go up to 1620. Ray traced global illumination only in the hideout. You can see PS5 performance. Do they show the Pro though? Because this is all just PS5 Pro or PS5 quality mode. Series S, PS5, graphics comparisons, RTGI. I don't think they show PS5 Pro. PS5 Pro AC shadows. So PS5 Pro performance, 60 frames per second, standard ray tracing. So the Pro is able to still turn on ray tracing, but shoot for 60. That's impressive. And then it can also do extended ray tracing and just target 30. And that's where it adds in ray traced reflections, it looks like. At least some. So, I mean, again, no shocker. The Series S is the weakest place to play it. The PS5 Pro is the best place to play it on console. And there's a lot of bells and whistles you get on the PS5 Pro that you do not get on the base consoles, which is what I like. Like, my thing is, if the game doesn't run at 120 frames, that's fine. But it needs to look like it can't run at 120 frames, right? Like, you need, if you're going to not be able to achieve crazy high frame rates, I need it to look like it's not able to achieve crazy high frame rates. My problem with certain games that have come out recently, like, Monster Hunter Wilds, is that they do not look particularly good, and they run not like they're the most graphically impressive game ever made, and that doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. If you're gonna struggle to maintain 60 frames, you need to be one of the most visually impressive games I've seen in a minute on a 4090. It needs to be gorgeous. It needs to be very impressive. But instead, we've been getting games that really struggle to to perform at all and struggle to look half decent. Shadows, whatever you want to say about the game, in terms of the graphics technology, is crazy impressive. With what they're pulling off in terms of global illumination and the like physics sim, hair sim, cloth sim, all of that's very, very well done. And as a result, it's heavy. If you crank every dial, if you turn all of the game settings up to ultra, even on like a 4090, you're going to be 70, 80, 90 frames, something like that, without frame generation on. I don't use frame generation. I don't really like it. I don't really use it moment to moment. I like VSync turned on. Otherwise, my capture gets screwed up and I have screen tearing. What are you going to do? Pisser is not used in AC Shadows on the Pro. It's using the same upscaler, but the Pro has RTGI in performance mode. Oh, there you go. They didn't need no Pisser. They don't need no Pisser. I'm loving my Pro, to be honest. I'm glad. I mean, I'm still shocked that Xbox didn't even try to do a mid-gen refresh of anything. I mean, I'm like, really? We're not? But it looks now like they're going to do a handheld, and they're going to do their own update console, but they're only going to do that in 2027. So I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
He took my thing.